Hail, konbanwa, good evening, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome back also to my Gods and Goddesses series. Today we will be doing something completely different than you probably are used to from me. Today we will be discussing the Shinto deity. Inari, more officially known as Inari Ōkami, is the Japanese deity, or kami as they say, which means spirit, deity, or god, of the Shinto religion, originating and based in Japan, who presides over a wide variety of different spheres of influence. One of these is foxes. They are often said to be a deity of foxes. They themselves are said to be a deity who is often taking the shape of a fox. They are a deity who presides over various things such as rice, tea, sake, which is made from rice. Fermented rice wine is what it is, basically. They preside over fertility, over agriculture, industry, finance, prosperity, worldly success, business, and traditionally also they were a deity of blacksmiths and merchants back when those specific professions in that sense were more common than they are today. Now, one of course could argue that a merchant is still a very relevant profession in terms of shopkeepers, etc. Now, why would Howling Wolf, the individual that mostly works with Germanic spirits, Germanic deities, who was initiated into the old Elder Fufark tradition, the runes, and who is a shaman of that particular path, why would they work with a Japanese deity? Now, I assure you it is not out of a sense of cultural appropriation or in any way, shape, or form that this is meant to be, something that I want to claim as a heritage of my own. I have in no way, shape, or form Japanese as ancestry, as far as I am aware. I do, however, find the culture fascinating. I do, however, not consider myself someone who is obsessed with Japan. I have respect for their culture. I do have respect for the religion, for the Shinto religion, of course, and for Buddhism as well. I think I've voiced similar opinions throughout some of my videos. However, Inari, because they are very much a business-oriented deity, as you can probably tell from the list that I have just given you on what their spheres of influence are, they are very much a business deity, and this is the approach that I originally took when I approached this particular deity, for them to assist in finances, in several other undertakings related to finances. And it is for this reason, out of respect and to honor and to give as dedication and devotion to Inari Ōkami, hereafter referred to simply as Inari, that I am making this video, much like I have done for the previous deities that I have made videos on. So this relationship, shall we call it, originally started out as a business relationship, and it is to this day a business relationship, although I have, I must say, come to appreciate the approach that Inari has taken and the efforts that Inari has taken on my part in terms of finances. So it is for this very reason that I am, as I said, giving praise to Inari through this video. And Inari, to provide a bit of a background on this particular deity, or as some people say, collection or collective of deities. Some say that Inari is basically a collection of deities of between 3 to 5 kami, or again, divinities, deities, spirits, gods, whatever you want to translate it as. And Inari is, if you have mentioned, if you have paid at all attention to how I have spoken of them, I have not referred to them as a he or as a she. I have referred to them as they or them. Their gender is said to be ambiguous. In other words, to some people, Inari has appeared as a male, and to some people, they have appeared as a female, and to some people, they have appeared as a fox, which is where the kitsune They're spirit servants who have a variety of a number of tails and colors, but I believe that Inari's specific kitsune are always white in color, is my understanding. I've only met a few of those kitsune in my interactions who were there on behalf of Inari as representatives, so I can only speak from that perspective, but I have not met other colored kitsunes in that particular respect. So Inari could be said to be male, they could be said to be female, they could be said to be androgynous, or they could just appear as a fox. And this may be explained by what I said previously, in that they may be a collection of deities who may be somewhere ranging in the number of between 3 and 5 is the most commonly agreed upon number. And I found this actually very fascinating. Another thing that adds to the mystery of Inari is that you will rarely, if ever, get to speak to Inari themselves. In my dealings with Inari, when I have spoken of dealings with Inari, what has really transpired is that I have dealt with the Kitsune representative spirits of Inari, and so has the friend of mine who introduced me to this particular deity. And these Kitsune usually take the message or the offer or the contract that you are presenting, and they will plead with Inari and present it to the deity. And then it will either be accepted or rejected, or a counter offer will be made. Now, like I said, Inari is, in this sense, a very business-like deity. And as someone who is straight to the point, as someone who is relatively, I'm here to get stuff done, I find this actually very refreshing. Despite the fact that I come from a culture where everything is very straightforward, where everything is very blunt and open and casual, as we do it in the Netherlands, where I'm originally from. Of course, in the US, things may be a little bit more formal and polite, I suppose, but which is, of course, where I currently live in the United States. But I actually found this a very pleasant change of scenery in that particular sense, because there is a lot of respect that needs to be shown when one approaches this particular deity, and we will get on that later. But at the same time, there is a very goal-oriented atmosphere when it comes to dealing with this particular deity. You approach them, their representatives will show up, they will take your offer, they will analyze it, they will tell you it is a good chance of being approved, it does not have a good chance of being approved, we will take it, and we will present it, then you will get back, it has been approved, yes or no, or maybe here's a counter offer, and your business is concluded, or will from here on out continue as you have proposed it to be continued. So that is a something that I want to give up front to those of you who are not at all familiar, or perhaps only mildly familiar with dealing with this particular deity. Inari is a very interesting kami of the Shinto religion, like I said, of the Japanese religion, and is in fact one of its principal deities, with about 32,000 shrines, Shinto shrines dedicated to Inari, which evidently is 1/3 of all shrines, Shinto shrines, that are in existence, which is very, very impressive. This makes Inari, and this is one of the reasons why I admittedly initially approached them, a very powerful, influential deity that even in the modern world, where the Western societies, of course, are dominated by Christianity and its deity, who, as if you have watched my channel, you may know I am absolutely not a fan of. Yeah, and if you go to the Middle East, his counterpart Allah, or perhaps if you believe this to be the case, they are one and the same deity, holds influence and sway there. So I wanted to have the help of a deity who could pack quite a punch in modern society, and who could still assist me with finances and certain other factors that I wanted help and boost with, if you will. And a friend of mine proposed Inari because they are this influential, and I liked the feeling of it, I liked the sound of it, and I approached the deity with a contract one day, and thus our relationship, our business relationship began. And they are, as you can clearly tell from what I cited earlier, someone who holds a sphere over a wide variety of professions, areas of life, and foods that bring wealth, abundance, fertility, and joy into one's life, particularly so related to physical experiences. Now, I have to preface here something that has always kind of irritated me about a lot of people who claim to be spiritual, and that is that they completely neglect or underplay the importance of one's physical experiences and existence in a materialistic sense. Because we are taught from our Judeo-Christian backgrounds that material possessions are not something to pursue. We are taught at the same time, of course, from a cultural perspective, to pursue it. And this creates a very guilt-ridden dichotomy that many of us, especially those of us who are a little older, who actually grew up in Christian or semi-Christian households, as was the case with me, where on one hand you were told not to pursue material things, which you need to have a stable life, let's face it. And on the other hand, you are told to pursue it because otherwise you won't be happy. And this creates a very strong internal conflict that I do not believe this deity in any way, shape, or form advocates. Because if you look at their spheres of influence, if you look at their spheres and areas of expertise and the things that they preside over, it is quite clear that they advocate an enjoyment of the material things in life, not in excess in that sense, but the enjoyment of things like sake, which is wine, alcohol, abundance, fertility, and fertility could of course be taken to imply sexual conduct and activity. Abundance and wealth could be taken in a spiritual sense, it could be taken in a sense of general happiness, it could be taken to mean financial wealth. And I find this a very healthy, refreshing mindset that is presented from a culture that is completely or almost completely untainted by a Judeo-Christian Abrahamic mindset. And the more I researched it, the more I looked into it, the more that I found myself come at peace with my desire for material gain in a certain sense. And now let me rephrase that, not in a certain sense, up to a certain point. By that I mean I do not need to be a billionaire, but I do, however, very strongly want to build a somewhat of a empire, I suppose, in a financial sense, because in my mind, and as we teach it in the Germanic traditions, we have a link that is established from our ancestors down all the way to the kids that we leave behind when we pass from this world. We, of course, call this the web of weird, or the web of fate. And this is made up of all the individual choices that our ancestors have made, of our environment, and of our, eventually, when we are old enough to start influencing the world in such a manner, our own choices. And this, in turn, is, of course, something that we will leave behind to our children. So, to me, as someone who currently does not yet have children, but wants them, and who wants to have a happy marriage, a happy love life, etc., who wants to create a legacy for his children to enjoy, I found this a very refreshing take on things, because it, to me, provided the feedback and justification, I would say, that I had so long sought but never found, or even outright had denied to my person by the Western mainstream religions. And that is, of course, to leave a fitting legacy, like I said, to leave to my kids and to be able to enjoy my own life and to make the life of my future spouse enjoyable. And to perhaps also, of course, assist the lives of friends and family. And you cannot do that without the possession of material wealth, of course. And what kind of father would I be if I were to not be able to provide abundant finance and money, if I so have the opportunity and power to do so, of course. If I have the circumstances and the, well, in this case, magic at my fingertips in order to facilitate such things. And this is something that is coming to me in a peaceful manner, even though I have never actually spoken to this deity, even though I have never actually interacted with this deity personally. Reading about them and thinking about their take and the society's take on such things, and that such deities exist that actually, of course, advocate such things. And the same with, of course, Njord from my own pantheon, of course, who was also said to be a deity of wealth and abundance and the bringing in of wealth, and much like Yngvi Frey, who was the Lord of the Bounty, the Lord of the Harvest, and the Lord of the Earth, etc. These beings, all of them together, the more that I learn about these deities and the more that I learn about such beings from different areas of the world, this, in my mind, gave me the conviction that I needed to finally strip away that last piece of Christian indoctrination that I had for so long, that the pursuit of material wealth and gain is an evil thing, that it is something that you should be scorned for and that you should be ridiculed for, because you will be greedy if you do it, and you will exercise a spirit of, gluttony and greed and all that sort of nonsense. However, the fact is, of course, we need material possessions, we need money in this world to survive. We need these things to get ahead, to provide and secure a future for our offspring and for our spouse and for our family. So these things are important. They're in some ways more important than spiritual development, because without such things, how are you going to have the base or the feedback off of which to build a spiritual development? And certainly the way that magic functions, it is something that requires the exertion of will and to be able to adapt and transmute according to your situation, and to then change things, to, of course, draw certain things to you to manifest positive results and outcomes. But how can you manifest something that you want when you don't think that you deserve such things? And this is one of the things that, if you have watched some of my previous videos where I discuss a familial curse that happened on my mother's side of my family, basically, I think that that greatly contributed to my idea of not deserving such things. And then, outside of our Western world, outside of our Western modern culture, outside of our modern Western religions, we have here a deity who says, these are the nice things in life, enjoy them. Come to me and we will, where possible, work something out. I will give you something if you can give me something in return. They accept prayers and requests and stuff like that in their shrines, of course. And now, as a magician, someone who has, in that sense, more to give than the average person, in terms of energy, in terms of things that I can do for them in such a manner, it is, of course, my responsibility to therefore give more in return to see results. And it is from this vantage point that I entered into a contract with the deity Inari. And despite the fact that, as I mentioned in previous videos discussing this familial curse, which I have recently, only a few days ago, undone finally, after a first unsuccessful, or partially successful attempt, I should say, because it weakened the curse, but it did not remove it outright. I have found that I saw amazing results as a result of the making of the contract. I actually discussed this in one of my rune initiation videos, my most recent one, Lagus, where I made a similar contract with the Lord Njord, of course, of my own pantheon, where these influences combined brought into my life through several areas significant amounts of wealth, to the point where I was finally able to enjoy life for at least a month until the curse struck back, of course, and continued to then um, nullify the amount of wealth and other kinds of abundance that had been flowing into my life. But now this curse is finally gone, and I look forward to, of course, seeing yet more results. But the fact is, I have already seen very positive, very powerful results as a result of working with Inari and, of course, also with Njord, because again, I have also made a contract with Njord to this end of finances, etc., but also to, in his case, address other things. Now, with Inari, I mostly have a contract that specifically deals with finances. And again, the results have been staggering up until the point where the curse decided to strike back. And that was fantastic, and that is part of the reason why I am actually very excited to make this video in order to share this. So, to get back on my actual main story here, my main things that I would like to present you with in this video. After all these internal processes that I have undergone in the past few weeks as I was fighting with this curse and as I was fighting also with this Abrahamic mindset that I was instilled with, that one should look to riches in heaven and not to riches on the earth because they're fleeting and temporarily. Well, guess what? So is your body, but that doesn't mean that you don't take care of your body now, does it? It doesn't mean that you don't wash yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't comb your hair. It doesn't mean that you fail to feed your body, unless it is, of course, for some sort of fasting ritual in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't mean that you don't take care of that of your children, of your spouse, of your friends, of whatever, when they are in need and you can afford to help them. That would be, frankly, scummy. So why would you not assist yourself where possible as well? And it is the stripping away that was finally facilitated, I feel, through indirectly or directly, I am not quite sure. However, I did ask Inari in this contract, as well as Njord, to basically help point out any and all blockages, curses, and spirits, etc., that would hinder my gain of financial success, and in order to build a successful future for myself, for my future spouse, and for my future children, and to leave a legacy to said children once I pass from this world. So that is something that I find very interesting, because I did put that in a contract, and I eventually started, of course, grappling with this curse directly afterwards, because I had known that this curse was there. And I make a contract with these two deities, and basically what happens is these things all come to light, and I begin to work on myself. I begin to do internal work, and I start understanding that there is a different perspective on this planet, that the perspective that I grew up with in my Abrahamic, specifically Christian upbringing, or partially so, because my father was for most of my childhood an atheist. Later he converted to a Jehovah's Witness to please my mother, because that's what it came down to. He literally told me that. But he was an atheist. My mom was a individual who believed in this Jehovah's Witness Christian faith, and who kind of dragged us down into it with it. But basically, like many Christian religions or cults or whatever, they believe that material possessions are to be kept to a minimum, and that they are to be, enjoyed after the destruction of the world basically happens and a paradise earth is created. It is rather unhealthy, and certainly if you understand, like I said earlier, manifestation, if you understand magic in such a manner, believing such things, that you are not worthy and that you should not enjoy such things, will cause you to not attract these things. That is the basic law of attraction. What you put out into the universe comes back at you. It is reflected back to you. And many people do not understand, of course, that this is a process that happens over time. You cannot just once say, I deserve money, and then boom, money enters into your life. No, there is a repetitive pattern necessary in order for you to match the vibration of your frequency and desire. So I think for people who have a difficulty with that, asking Inari for help, perhaps with this kind of issue, from a culture that has not been tainted with Judeo-Christian or Abrahamic values, or lack thereof, in my personal opinion, that it would be very enlightening and very refreshing to see the perspective of something like this. Because if you read about Inari, you will find that there are Japanese corporations who put shrines to Inari on their rooftops or on the top of their buildings in order to basically give praise and to invoke their blessing from the deity. And once you start working with this mindset, with this understanding that it is not harmful to embrace the attraction of material wealth and desires and the enjoyment of the things of the physical, this is going to start a roller coaster, a very positive one in your life, and that I'm already seeing the results of, that basically will further facilitate your positive manifestation in that regard. So you will understand that your physical being needs to be nurtured, that your physical being deserves to be nurtured, that it deserves to have pleasure too, that it deserves to have positive experiences. And this is not to speak from a hedonistic kind of approach. It is from a healthy, balanced, spiritual kind of approach, I would say. It is okay to enjoy yourself, whether it is with money, with making, buying, or eating food, whether it is with sex, whether it is with all these other things. Sex is not dirty. Eating and enjoying food is wonderful. It's there for a reason, okay? It is something that nature has blessed us with. And to enjoy the products and the benefits that money brings in our modern society, which relies on it, that is also a necessity and a happy, good thing to be able to have enough of, to be able to afford such things. And I can attest to this because I grew up in at least by Northwestern European standards, a very poor household. My mother did not work. My father was a sole breadwinner for most of my childhood. There were periods where my mother briefly worked. But my father was a lower class individual in terms of income. And so was my mother, after having come from a family of nobles, which this curse that I mentioned earlier had done in, basically. I grew up poor, and I also had a younger sibling, my sister, who basically, who I and myself, basically, we grew up relatively poor. And some days we actually wondered if we would have a proper meal on our plates. And that is, it is, of course, very annoying and very irritating to be put through such circumstances, because you do around you see other children who are having affluence and who have, the toys that you want, and who are able to afford the video games that you would love to play, and you can't afford it. So, these are, of course, relative first world problems. I understand that. But that does not mean, just because they're first world problems, that you should feel ashamed over wanting them. You have access to it. Why not? Why would you not, want to be able to enjoy it? Because that is, of course, something that you're also told when you're a kid. Well, be glad that you're not a starving child in Africa. Well, yes, I am very glad that I'm not a starving child in Africa. Thank you very much. I understand that my situation could be worse, but my situation could also be better. Why would I not be okay with my situation being better? there is a difference between gratitude and screwing yourself over with the law of attraction and magic in general, in such a sense, of course. So, to this end, I would recommend that one approaches the deity Inari for contracts or other forms of assistance, whether that is with the placing of spiritual helpers, perhaps even familiars, assistance in some way, shape, or form, to assist with increasing your finances, to increase the running of a business, to get a business off the ground, to perhaps expand your customer base, to, if you are, for example, someone who is in the area or sector of agriculture, to be more able to be successful, to work smarter instead of harder, I suppose, in order to attain worldly success. You can approach them to develop or help develop an industrious spirit if you are someone who has the desire to build a little bit of an empire for yourself, but who, for whatever reason, may lack the energy, the motivation, or in some way, shape, or form, the willpower to facilitate such a thing. And Inari can, of course, as the deity of fertility, also assist with said matters in a variety of ways. So, as I said, however, if you do decide to approach Inari, in ritual, whether that is for the purpose of making a contract, or whether that is for asking them for help in some way, shape, or form, in a more prayer-filled, pleading manner, I suppose, then it should be noted that you will likely not, and perhaps never, get to speak to Inari themselves. They will likely send out kitsune to you, which are the fox spirits, who are functioning basically as ambassadors, messengers, and servants to do the communication on behalf of Inari. This can, for some people, I imagine, serve as a lowering of barriers to some people who may feel more comfortable talking to representatives, who may feel more comfortable talking to a quote-unquote lower spirit, and by lower I of course mean lower on the hierarchy, than to a deity directly, because I can understand if you are perhaps a new practitioner, or if you are someone who is easily intimidated, and for whatever reason this may be, you may want to speak to someone who is a bit more on equal footing to you than a deity themselves would be. I imagine that it could be intimidating to talk to a deity themselves. On the other hand, of course, some people may be put off by what they perceive as impersonal. Now, I have to say here, many pagan deities from the Western world and from the Middle Eastern world are, due to the overthrow of quote-unquote paganism as a general rule of thumb by the Abrahamic religions, they are not nearly as busy as someone like Inari is, who is still actively worshipped by a significant portion of the country in which they originated. Like I said, 1/3 of the total Shinto shrines in Japan are dedicated to the deity Inari, so that is of course quite sizable. Now compare that to how many temples to Odin do you see these days? How many sacred groves of Freya or Thor or whatever do you see? There is, I believe, one Asatru temple in Iceland that recently, in recent years, has opened. And other than that, I do not really see, other than a couple of kinships, of course, who actively go out en masse to give praise to the Lord Odin, shall we say. So that is something to think about. The busier a deity is, the more likely that they are to use representatives. So please do keep that in mind. It is not done because of a impersonal approach, in my understanding. It is more something that they do because they're simply too busy. And most pagan deities, and I personally would classify, and I mean absolutely no offense to those of you who may be practicing Shinto and who may be offended by my usage of the linking between the two, but I personally consider Shinto a pagan religion in that they are not Abrahamic in nature. So Most pagan religions, including Shinto, do of course not claim that most of their deities are omnipotent in that sense, or that they are all-encompassing, or all-powerful, or all-knowing. So it is understood by me, and by most of you, I would hope, that a deity would eventually start delegating. And you even see this with Yahweh, of course, who does claim to be omnipotent and who does claim to be all-powerful and everywhere all the time. They use angels, or their specific brand of angels, I should say, because there are many, many angelic beings who do not work for the Abrahamic deities, fortunately. So this is something that you should keep in mind. They will delegate, and think of it more like a CEO or an executive who delegates things, tasks to different spirits. So if that is something you have a problem with, please do be understanding of that. I personally have never found this to be a problem because I am okay with dealing with somebody who is a little more on equal footing, but at the same time I also have no problem in talking to deities directly. And to be fair, I did approach them with a specific contract in mind. I approached them specifically because I liked the business-oriented style. I was like, I want to make money, or I want to increase my finances. Here's how I want it to go, and here's what I would like you to do for me, and here's what I can do for you. Do we have a deal? And I got told, you have a deal, and we got a deal. So I saw the results of that, and the rest is history. And part of the reason why I am now making this video. So, this is something that I personally thought no problem. And I hope that perhaps that what I just said may have remedied some of your concerns about perhaps Inari's personality or lack thereof in your perception. And that this is not something that they do because of disinterest in you as an individual. It is something that they just do because they are very busy individuals. And another thing, of course, to keep in mind is that when one approaches Inari, they are from the Japanese culture. Us Westerners are individuals who could, in some way, shape, or form, learn a lot in terms of politeness and expression of gratitude from the Japanese, in my personal opinion, and I'm saying that as a blunt Dutch person. So it is understood when you approach Inari, or their representatives in most cases, that if you are a Westerner or from some other area of the world that is not Japan, that you will lack some, to them I imagine, basic courtesies or ritual displays of respect, shall we say. And we will be getting into this a little later, because to continue, when you do call on them and when the representatives do show up, I have found the bargaining, the transaction to be smooth, swift, to be straightforward. And make no mistake, if the representatives, if the kitsune think that your offer is not fair, if your offer is not up to par, up to snuff, they will make a counteroffer, and they may ask more from you if they think that you are underpaying for what you are asking. Alternatively, and this is what I found, if you pay more than what you would or normally do, because I have the capability of doing so. I'm not saying that to brag, I'm just stating this as an example, because if you pay more, you obviously will receive more services in return. So do also keep that in mind. The bigger the sacrifice, the bigger the return. So that is something that you also need to keep in mind. If you are a magician or whatever other kind of practitioner you label yourself as, who has more to give and who is prepared to give more, who is prepared to sacrifice more, like most deities, you will receive more in return. A gift for a gift, as they say. And in some cases, the representatives may agree to a contract that originally, may have seemed like that you got the better end of the deal. Please do be aware that in such cases, you likely are receiving what you pay for. Now, it is also understood, of course, that some people may just have less to give. And this is going to be something that is going to have to be worked out between you and the representatives, the Kitsune, of Inari. This is not something that I can guarantee anything about, because you are dealing with a deity who presides over business, and they are also, of course, interested in gaining something from the interaction with you, as most deities are. And most deities who are honest about this will tell this to your face. So I find this personally a very reasonable attitude, and one that is prudent and befitting of a deity of commerce and finance, which is, like I said, exactly the area that I consulted Inari for and entered into a contract with them with. So, with all that out of the way, I would like to state, like I did earlier, that for those of you who are, like myself, a Westerner, who clearly will not, in most cases, unless you have delved into this real thoroughly and who may have studied this kind of stuff in depth, that it will not always be expected of you to know all the polite customs and other sorts of expressions of formality and politeness and that sort of thing. When I started working with Inari, I had a lack of understanding of certain rites and customs, for example. It is in my experience understood and appreciated that this will be the case by the Kitsune, with whom you will be dealing on behalf of Inari themselves. In fact, we were informed when we first approached Inari, and by we I mean that friend that suggested working with this deity and myself, um, that certain kitsune are evidently assigned to different regions, and these kitsune will familiarize themselves with the local customs and practices. And you have to understand that because Inari is a business deity, that this is also in their best interest. It is basically building customer relations. It is basically adjusting to the local customs and formalities, or lack thereof, I suppose. So do be aware of that. It is not always required or necessary for you to entirely immerse yourself in Japanese culture. It is understood that you are a Westerner, that you are an American, that you are German, that you are British, that you are Irish, etc., etc., if you choose to work with them and you grew up in that particular area of the world. On the other hand, it is also a very prudent and courteous display on your part, of course, if you at least understand basics of Japanese culture and courtesy. For example, clasping your hands together and giving a deep bow as a sign of respect. And many of us in the Western world, of course, would initially associate this with worshipping, with praying, and sometimes this is indeed done too in Ari and other kami, but you have to understand that in Japanese culture, it is a sign of respect. It is a sign of courtesy. It is an acknowledgement. It is not done to grovel. It is merely done to acknowledge the other person and to show them respect. So please do not come at this from a, but I don't want to do that because I don't want to worship, blah, 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 blah. That is not what is asked of you. It is a politeness. It is a cultural difference. One that is, in my opinion, so unreasonably criticized for that by some people, because I have known, for example, the father of the friend that I mentioned, that he would criticize, I believe it was Barack Obama, for bowing to the Japanese president, I believe it was, or a minister of some sort. And he was basically like, oh yeah, look at that, he's worshipping the guy. And my friend was like, no, he's just engaging in their local customs. And this too is similar if you engage in ritual. It is not expected of you to bow to worship a deity that you've never, spoken to. It is understood that you are, wishing to enter a business contract in many cases, unless, of course, you wish to engage with Inari on a more personable level. But again, you will likely the first several times, I suppose, and maybe even you will never meet Inari personally. I do not quite know how that would personally work, because most of my interaction with Inari has, of course, been business related, as I have mentioned repeatedly. So do keep that in mind. I cannot really expressively help you, explicitly help you, I should say, when it comes to building a personal relationship with the deity or deities. The point in case that I'm trying to make here is make an effort. And this will be appreciated, this will be respected, this will be welcomed, and you will be honored for it. And in return, they will show you the same courtesy and understanding that even though you come to their turf, because that is, of course, essentially what you are doing. You are approaching a deity from a different country, from a different region of the world, to enter into business relationships with for other purposes. And you show them respect insofar as you are aware, and they show you respect for that in return. It is understood and honored that you are not from their culture, is basically what I'm saying. Now, to cite a bit of an example with this, I understood the clasping your hands together, bowing, providing food offerings. But there was one thing that I read about. For example, if you go to a Shinto shrine, you're supposed to wash your hands and your mouth to be ready to meet the gods, as they put it, I believe. And you are supposed to do that with water. And I did not know about this, so naturally, the first time that I approached them, that I approached Inari, I did not do this, but there was no uh, sign that they were irritated with this. There was no sign to me that they were feeling disrespected, or that the deity was feeling disrespected in some way, shape, or form. I took the effort to write kanji, to write Inari's name in kanji on the contract that I was presenting to the deity, to the representatives of the deity in this case. I took efforts to buy a nice bottle of sake, Nigori sake specifically. My friend made rice cakes and I believe fried tofu, which is an offering, by the way, that the kitsune are said to love, which is what you will traditionally see in Japan when you go to Shinto temples. Many stores will, on the way there, sell fried tofu, I believe, sometimes with fox ears included. And so this is understood. Okay, you offer incense, you offer food, you offer the sake, and you offer the candles, and we will discuss all these specific details on what to offer and how to offer it later on. And I could tell that it was appreciated, and I was basically told by the spirits in question, the effort that you people have put into this is appreciated and acknowledged. Thank you for that. And so that was in my opinion, a good start of relations, shall we say. And since then, I have taken it upon myself to research things a bit further. Of course, one other thing is, for example, if you approach Inari, that you have to take off your shoes, make sure that you are taking off your shoes and that you're barefoot, or perhaps with socks. I'm not quite clear yet on how that is specified, but there are many other things, of course, that the average Westerner probably does not have access to. I mean, most of us do not have a Shinto temple nearby, I imagine. So there are many other things that we probably, as Westerners, do not have explicit access to, such as amulets and talismans and other things that are used in the Shinto religion that you use either as part of worship or to invoke specific blessings, etc., etc. I imagine that you could make them yourself. However, the details on that you will have to research yourself. So, with all that said, I would like to discuss some acceptable and appreciated offerings to the deity Inari that are within my knowledge, and also offerings that are given to his or to their kitsune messengers that are easily accessible to the average Westerner. Some of these would be sake rice wine, depending on where you live, depending on how easy that is to come by in your country or in your area. Food made with rice, because Inari is also a rice deity, of course. I imagine tofu, of course, fried tofu is one of the main treats that are given to the kitsune. Teas, especially green teas, pure teas, cleansing teas. and especially if extra effort was put into this and you homebrewed the tea yourself. Incense with themes of tea, of purity, fertility, abundance, food, etc. So any incense that is scented with that kind of theme in mind. Traditional Japanese incense, such as, and excuse me if I completely butcher the pronunciation here, Hawaii Ko, I think it is called, which is aimed at increasing fortune and abundance. It is a traditional Japanese incense. I actually have a box of that in my house currently in order to utilize for such rituals. Candles of the color red. Red is a color that is very strongly in Japan associated with Inari, which are usually the colors of their shrine. Gold and yellow, and I believe to a lesser extent also green, especially if you approach them with intent of money, finance, etc. And I would say that that would be more of a last resort, though. I do feel that the colors red and yellow are most welcomed by the deity and by their messenger, by their messengers, I should say. Excuse me. Lastly, statues of Inari and or statues of the kitsune, or foxes that are devoted to Inari would also be very welcome. Alternatively, I suppose, because historically Inari was a blacksmith or a blacksmith deity or a swordsmith deity specifically, depending on where you read about it. Weapons, I imagine, swords, katanas would also dedicated to Inari would also make fine offerings on your altar, for example, to this particular deity. That concludes my video. I thank you all so much for watching. I hope that it was informative, and with my limited Western scope on things, I hope that I have done a adequate service to this wonderful deity. And I thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Sayonara.